Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, Charlie. Good morning. Or good evening there in Japan.
Yeah. Good morning. How's everything out in Vegas?
Good. It's 6 a.m. here, and it's a fight day for Yusaku Kinoshita.
So it's going to be great.
He's going to do.
I saw his interview on the We Are RIZIN podcast.
Oh, yeah. He's a very funny guy. Right. I mean, Kinoshita, he's fighting. He's the main event of the show. And, Dana White's Contender Series is very minimum compared to like UFC shows. Mm-hmm. So there's only, 5 fights, 10 guys, We all go there to the venue and we finish show in 2 hours kind of stuff, Do
you like that, though? Does it kind of take some of the pressure off of the fighters?
Yeah, I like it, too. But the fact that this is what every fighter says, that UFC shows or contender shows or Bellator, PFL, whatever that is, the time that you spend at the venue is very minimal compared to Japanese shows. Japanese shows, they got opening ceremony, rehearsal, ceremony, even closing ceremony. So you're looking at maybe 10, 12, even 14 hours a day, right?
Yeah, because they all have to be there for the opening ceremony. So you always see like backstage footage of them like sleeping backstage.
Exactly, right. And they give this one tatami floor for it to lay down and sleep. And so you spend like good 12 hours at the venue. But compared to that in America or any other shows, you spend maybe 3-4 hours at most,
Yeah.
So that's very good, And and the fact that I think I need to point it out here that to the Japanese fans especially that this is a Contender Series, but it's very international at this point. As you know, from maybe 3 years ago, they started booking international guys, fighters. And tonight's show, out of 10 fighters, there's only 2 Americans. So
really?
8 were from outside country, meaning they got a visa, a work visa, blah, blah, blah. They flew in and stuff like that. So, when you really, really look at it, the contenders, in terms of the younger talent, it has to be the best in the world. And even in the quality of fighters, PFLs is very good now because they offer $1 million and they got good tournaments and stuff like that. But when you really look at the caliber of fighters, the depth of fighters, Contenders is very good. You look at the guy like record has 14-0 fighting in Contenders, right? So
it's interesting. And you got to think that like fighters much prefer the Contender Series to the Ultimate Fighter Series. Like it seems like so much less of a hassle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The Ultimate Fighter, you have to spend a couple months there. Of course, you get paid weekly and stuff like that. But other side of the coin on Ultimate Fighter is that it does make you famous. It gives you exposure every week on national television. So
if
by
you're
the
on
time you seasons, right?
If you're on a good season,
if you're on a good season, right? Yeah, Sure. Like, do you even watch Ultimate Fighter every episode right now? Not many.
Oh,
right?
No. I think the only seasons I watched every episode was like the heavyweights and the first strawweights.
Mm-hmm, the girls, right? Right. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people fast forward to the fight, but whatever. But they still get to fight on national television,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So
even though, let's say, if you don't make it, your name is out there, so their managers will have a little bit easier time nailing deal with other promotions. So you put value to it. But to answer your question, yes, because Contender Series is only one fight contract, no strings attached. Well, so if you don't make it, you can even fight the next month.
I always thought too, the Ultimate Fighter just seemed like less than ideal training situation because you're not with your team. You're kind of
you're
in
not
this house living
with your own team, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, after they film, they all go back, and before the finale, they're gonna have a good 2 months of a fight camp at their own coaches. So
right.
So I think in that sense kind of makes sense. But anyway, I think I should mention that Kinoshita is the very first Japanese guy in the Contender Series, and I hope the Japanese fighter realizes that this is the one way to get into the UFC.
Well, if he wins, I think he'll get a lot of attention over here.
Sure.
Because if he wins and then gets into the UFC, it'll be like, I bet you'll see way more Japanese fighters applying to be part of it.
Exactly, trying to be part of it, right? The manager bugging them, calling them, which is good.
So I feel like, especially in Japanese MMA, you need that one fighter to kind of like go and do it. And then all the other fighters are like, oh, and then they like go follow that path.
in Japanese cultures, I mean, when you look at the right, everybody else look at right, right? So that's how it
Exactly.
works. So let's say theoretically, if Mr. Ryoji Kudo won the semifinal, if he's up for $1 million final, a lot of Japanese fans would have talked about it, right? And if he
Especially if he
wins
won,
that $1 million, which he's not going to this year because he lost, but if that happens, then I think a lot of fighters would look at the PFL, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So in the same theory, right, if Kinoshita wins contenders and wins a contract, then I think that will make a wave. But if he loses and doesn't win contract, and I think people will kind of ignore it, right?
Yeah, pretty much, exactly.
Yeah, which is sad, though.
I think most failures are ignored and successes are celebrated.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, hopefully, let's see if he wins or not. But I just wanted to mention one thing that in Japan, that only a handful of people are now debating that it's better to have a bigger followers on Instagram or YouTube than training to learn more technique or winning fights, which is just ridiculous to me, right?
Well, it's also stupid because you talked about this before with me in private, but social media is not as big in Japan as it is in the United States.
No, not
so
at
like
all.
a popular fighter, who I would consider like an extremely popular fighter in Japan, would have several hundred thousand, like over 100,000 followers. Where in the U.S. you have like superstars that have millions, but in Japan it's never that high, and I just don't think it should be that big of a priority anyway. Even if the numbers are big, I just don't like that mindset at all.
No, not at all. And the bottom line is this: let's say if you're a baseball player, if you can't hit, if you strike out all the time, do you go to your manager and say, "Hey, put me on the bench of the World Series because I got 10,000 followers or 1,000,000 followers"? That conversation never flies in the professional sports. In my experience, when I talk to any matchmakers, I've never really mentioned about, oh, this guy has 500,000 followers and blah blah blah. You know?
Yeah, that it seems like something that would only work for like a feeder show.
Exactly,
yeah, but
right.
No big promotion, I think, would really care about it.
No.
Now, obviously, there's exceptions. I mean, Mikuru is very popular on social media, but he's also a talented fighter, so it kind of balances off. But.
Right, exactly. But Mikuru is the one actually who said that, oh, you know, since I have over 1 million viewers or whatever, that subscriber on YouTube, I think I can get UFC to get interested in me. I think I can sign with UFC. I mean, come on. I mean, I think that's a mentality of cheating on the college applications. I really think so. It's like asking some consultant to cheat on your college applications, like what happened in the United States a couple of years ago.
Yeah. You know? I would almost rather, if I was a coach, I'd almost rather that my fighter did not do social media.
I agree, actually.
And just I know a lot of like professional comedians and podcast hosts and things like that actually have someone do their social media for them.
Exactly. They have press people who does that.
Where like, they'll take the pictures themselves.
Right.
And maybe like give ideas about like, this is the kind of stuff that you should post this week. But they don't read the comments. They don't read the messages. They don't bother themselves with any of that.
Exactly, right. So that's what it should be, right? I mean, and I know a lot of MMA fighters in the States or even outside of Japan that the manager does have the password and, you know, login info for all their social medias, and they do update their social medias too, right? I don't do that, you know, but but I agree because that should be controlled. But anyway, I think the point here is that they should be training and learning technique instead of worrying about number of followers.
Yeah, I just don't.
It's a stupid thing.
Is this all because of breaking down? Do you think that's where this is coming from? Mikuru's success, and everyone's trying to copy it now because it's died down a lot. But there was this weird like 6-month period, like last year, where every single fighter started a YouTube channel in Japan.
Right.
And 95% of them were awful because all they were doing was copying other people's YouTube channels. Like they weren't taking an idea and running with it. They were just like literally doing the exact same thing that someone else did on their YouTube channel. It was just awful. Like
here's what it is.
The one that I always saw was they would blindfold themselves and then have like those Funko bats and try to hit each other. Like that's not that much fun to watch. And when you've seen it on like 6 channels that week, you're like, oh, this person's copying what he saw. Yeah, it's just awful. And thankfully, most of those have died.
You know what? I'll tell you on the record, the reason why many fighters, especially in RIZIN, started YouTube during that period is RIZIN asked them to do it. They
No.
encouraged many fighters to the YouTube
I
channel.
remember that because RIZIN. Do you remember when RIZIN tried to make like a series of prank videos?
Yeah.
Where
They had
Sakakibara
to
like
shake
invited
Paul,
Sidari over. He was like, "You're fired," and I'm like, "Oh, this like." I feel like sometimes Sakakibara learns the wrong message from something. It's like, this is very successful, but he like picks the wrong reason why it's successful to apply to RIZIN.
Right. I mean, but right now so therefore some coaches are even saying like, oh, well, you should look into breaking downs, how they get into brawl on the presser, and that's how you promote the fight. And it's same for UFC. Is that some of the coaches saying? But it's totally different though. You know?
I just don't like that because I've always thought that fighters came across better if they just were themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you try to be someone you're not, kind of like when with Jeremy Stevens tried to act tough to Conor McGregor,
right?
Everyone just laughs at you, like they see through it immediately. It's unnatural. It doesn't work.
I think it's a clear example. Is like Colby Covington, where he portrayed himself. It's just not likable, but I think he's a good guy. You know what I mean? But
yeah. And especially in Japan, where I just don't see traditional Japanese fan base liking that kind of social media first instead of training.
No, exactly. So it's only the crowd that the Asakura brought into this sports is just try to create this and make sense out of this. Like, if you're a professional, you're supposed to PR yourself and market yourself, which is correct. But you have to win fights first. You have to have that record. You have to prove that you're worthy of professional athletes. And this is when I got into a huge argument with one of the coaches. But one of the coaches told me this, I'm trying to create some way for my fighters to make a living. And I told him, but this is a professional sport. If you don't produce the results, what do? You quit. You know what I mean? You don't do something else and try to pretend like a professional athlete, which we know not, because you're making money out of something else. You're using MMA as just as like one of the elements to make a fun about, or make a joke about, or make some story about, whatever that is. But it's not a professional athlete, right?
Like if I was that coach, I guess my comment to that coach would be, I would only take that approach if I was 100% convinced this person did not have a future as a fighter. And I would just be like, you should transition into something else. But because if the most important thing in fighting is winning.
Exactly, right. Or record, or what do you do in that cage or in the ring.
Yeah.
That should beat everything, right?
Yeah, so that should be all you're focused on.
Exactly. And when you do, let's say if you're a Major League Baseball agent doing negotiation, they look at the record, right? They look at all the stats and they go through everything else. Of course, they might talk about social media, but that's just like less than 1% of the elements on negotiations.
Yeah, I feel like social media is also not that important in Japan. I just don't see it. I mean,
right.
It's important, but it's not a focus at all.
No. And I'll tell you this on the record. I'm now regretting the fact that I pushed Mizuki and Aoki to the YouTube channel. I might even discontinue that thing, because when I look at all my clients, no one wants to do YouTube. Nobody cares about social media. Kuramoto, Seiki, Mashima, those Japanese guys.
If you're going to do Mizuki on a YouTube, you got to put Murata in there too, because
that's right.
they have an interesting dynamic.
I'm thinking of sending those two to Bangtao in Thailand. So why not? I mean, they can do something interesting there. I mean, I just want to stick with the MMA thing, not just pranks or
No. Don't do that.
Amateurs or beating up on some guy off the street kind of stuff. I really want to show a training footage or what they do on the rehab or whatever that is,
Well, that just doesn't seem like any. I mean, I've spoken to Mizuki several times. It just doesn't seem like anything within her personality to do any of that stuff.
Those two are not interested in YouTube at all, period.
I just want to see. I saw hilarious. It was on Twitter where Murata gave Mizuki a rice ball for Boss Day.
Yes.
So, yeah.
No, what's so funny about the Mizuki now YouTube channel is like the video that scores the highest number of viewership is about training. So it's obviously their fans are interested in training. They're not interested in them doing pranks or making predictions on some fights and stuff like that. They want to see them train, do what they do to get better.
I don't know who would say that, but the coaches, the popular YouTube channels over here, each kind of cater to their own audience. So Miura made his own because the people are just being themselves.
Exactly, because he's catering to his own audience, but it doesn't mean the other fighters' audience is the same, right? So
no, not at all. So, if anything, I think it'd be more valuable for fighters to generate their own unique fan base.
Yeah, of course, right. So that it doesn't necessarily have to be YouTube, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the real sports fans, I really like to see fighter wins in the cage, and real hardcore MMA fans in Japan would like to see Japanese fighter win in the UFC or whatever. So. That's way more than getting fights in Twitter and stuff like that, right? So
exactly.
No, but let's talk. So Kinoshita is one of the guys who doesn't do social media, and he look at his Twitter and say, "Well, I have a small number of followers," and he doesn't care. He just wants to come, win contract, make a living as a professional athlete.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah. Now I want to get into talk about this. Since you talk about social media, let's talk about Buakaw and Miura. For those in the States who doesn't know anything about this guy, Kota Miura is the son of a very popular soccer player in Japan, Kazu Miura. And for some reason, he's very popular in Indonesia and Asia because
he's very popular with Vietnamese and Thai women.
Why is that? What happened? What triggered that? Because he has over 500,000 followers on Instagram.
I first noticed it on TikTok.
Okay.
When Thai fighters like Stamp Fairtex and people were reposting his videos and like talking about how hot he was.
Okay. So
I think a lot of young women in those countries think he's super hot. The press conference for this event was so weird to me. There was like some sort of fan meet and greet that they had, and nobody was going up to Buakaw. It was just a line of women going up to meet Miura as Buakaw just sat there. It was like the weirdest thing for me to watch. And then
it's almost like an Idol's concert.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Did you see what Buakaw said afterwards?
No, I didn't actually.
He said, "Don't worry, ladies. I sent him home safe."
Yeah, he didn't hit them. It was obvious. The Buakaw was such a great fighter. He knew exactly what he was doing. That's a true professional. He didn't hurt the guy.
Do you think Miura was paid a fortune? Why would he take that fight?
He probably got paid fortune. I mean, I think there's a lot of controversy about that because his coach/manager Miyata actually apparently did not consult with the RIZIN before accepting this fight. Yeah. So the RIZIN got a little bit, kind of pissed off because they thought,
Well, I know they got pissed because before his fight in RIZIN, promotional footage and materials for this started coming out.
Right.
So then they got upset because it looked like he wasn't focusing on RIZIN. It looked like he was focusing on the kickboxing.
Well, he must
have paid him a fortune because, I mean, Buakaw may be in his 40s, but he's Buakaw. Right. He looks absolutely ripped.
Right. And the bottom line is this, and I did see the video made by Mr. Miyata explaining that how this was exhibition, so it was not violation of a contract, whatever that is. But I think he's missing a huge point. I'm telling this on the record. Mr. Miyata does this all the time. In Japanese business, when you get some kind of offer like that, even though you're not contractually obligated, if you want to keep a good relationship, you will tell them, hey, listen, I got this offer, but I'm going to take it. So I hope that's okay. Then they could coordinate to make sure, those footage will not be run in the public before his fights, which Miura's fights end up getting canceled, right? Because of his coronavirus and stuff. So the bottom line is about discussing and coordinating to make sure that both sides are good. And that's something lacking out of,
I just don't see Miyata caring about that.
Exactly. He doesn't.
No, not at all.
No. He doesn't educate fighters at all in that sense. I know there's one case where one of his fighters was booked to a show in Singapore. And, they were supposed to, they were on a multi-fight deal. So they were supposed to go through a manager for the second and third fight, but Miyata skipped them. And never told the manager anything about that. So he does something that it's really against the industry rules and standards. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons, actually, I'm not really touching his fighters because it's just more headache. you know. So anyway, so yeah, I think that's the issue about that, and we all know it was an exhibition fight, so it wasn't the real fight. So
Yeah.
Miura went there, made a lot of money. So
Yeah.
and it's a one-time thing, so I'm pretty sure he's coming back to RIZIN and fight, right?
Made a lot of money, broke a bunch of hearts, came
Yeah,
back.
exactly. And he'll be back in RIZIN, even though RIZIN's mad or whatever that is. RIZIN will need a guy like
when you're
that.
saying that RIZIN was mad, I was kind of in RIZIN's current situation. I feel like RIZIN needs Miura more than Miura needs RIZIN, to be honest.
Yeah, here's what it is. That's when I have to go back to the discussions about this, how important the social media followers are. You said it's good for the feeder shows, but the RIZIN's RIZIN. This is not supposed to be a feeder show. Are they going to rely on?
I don't think it's a social media following that's important for RIZIN. He's genuinely popular. For some reason, they turned him into a star very quickly.
I know, and it's because of his father too, right? Probably.
Yeah, that's 100% what it is. It's because of his father, and so people know who he is. They know that he fights for RIZIN. The social media is almost irrelevant because none of the people following him are Japanese, so they aren't consuming RIZIN.
That's true, right? They're not buying tickets.
Yeah,
they're not flying from Vietnam to watch RIZIN shows, right? So
not yet.
They might even do a tour. Who knows, right?
Yeah, kind of like back when the Japanese would take tours to Seattle to watch Ichido play. They might make tours from Miura.
So talk about RIZIN. When you said that the RIZIN need Miura, RIZIN need more good news or good talent, right? So they're doing a Super RIZIN presser in Hawaii tomorrow.
Now, I have to admit, I was looking at social media and I noticed that somebody that went to the U.S. with Kinoshita is now in Hawaii.
Yes.
Mr. Hagiwara.
Yeah. He's fighting somebody. I know that. They will announce that. Yeah. So obviously the Super RIZIN part of the show has what? As I said, it's 5 fights.
5 fights.
Mayweather, Mikuru, and now Kyohei is one of them, right?
What does it look like? It looks like I think Jack Wannon did a very good job of describing it. He says everyone that's into it kind of has a feeling what's going on, but can't describe what Super RIZIN is. And all we know so far is that it's 5 fights that may all be non-MMA fights, or some of them may be non-MMA fights. So there might be boxing, there might be kickboxing, there might be Muay Thai, who knows? But it's going to be a variety of mixed martial arts. And they're doing the tryouts in Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
For the auditions.
I think they did throw many ideas from like Team RIZIN, Team Mayweather, all boxing fights to all 5 fights in different rules, such as, it could be MMA, boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, or even mixed rule, whatever that is, even grappling, who knows, right? But I think they're still throwing out the ideas. And they're not really totally set on all 5 fights, Well,
the way that things have been going recently, I 100% agree that they're flying by the seat of their pants. And this will probably be decided last minute what's going on.
Right. And also there's also injury factors too. You always have to be concerned about the injuries, or even corona, who knows, right? So and I think all we know is that this presser, you see Hagiwara there, and you saw Hiramoto already on the plane. So all these guys are going to be there, and they're going to do something. And hopefully, like you said earlier, Sakakibara is not going to use some content from Breaking Down in the wrong manner to try to promote this show. But I think we can predict something is going to happen in his presser, because otherwise there's no reason to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting they're doing it in Hawaii, which there's fan theories about Gomi versus BJ Penn in boxing. So I think that might be wishful thinking.
Right. But the sad thing is, like, does anybody in States talking about this? No. Does anyone in States know about this RIZIN tryouts? No. Right? So, I mean, we have a client in Hawaii we're having a problem getting fights for him because he's in Hawaii. So I'm thinking about sending him to the tryout, but he's probably overqualified.
Yeah.
And he lives in Hawaii, and he didn't know anything about this tryout. So,
yeah. Well, hopefully it's not like the press conference of Mikuru in Vegas, because that was just sad. Hopefully this is like a positive thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be much. Well, I mean, It's gonna be like a variety show. I think I think I have they're gonna have a bunch of fighters there, and I'm pretty sure Mayweather is there with the SP and everybody else. So I think we can expect something to happen.
It'll be interesting because if Mikuru is there, there's also a chance that some of the YouTube personalities that seem to orbit him also show up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I have to bring this up. Did you see that this is being broadcast on Fight TV?
Yes, I know.
It's like RIZIN stepped in a time warp and went back 5 years. It's like, what's going on? Stream Pass must not work, or that Stream Pass must. Do they not plan for Stream Pass to be accessible outside of Japan? I'm just very confused.
I have no idea. I just never even bothered to ask about that. But it's obviously Japanese promoters or even Sakakibara-san from Fridays, they're used to announce something first and they'll figure it out later. Even contract way to everything else. And I think a lot of fans are not criticizing this upcoming RIZIN show, Super RIZIN show, because so far they announced only 3 cars. Or 2 cars? 3 cars?
For Super RIZIN, they've only announced one.
One, that's right. But the whole RIZIN 30...
And RIZIN 38, they've only announced one.
So that's 2. Plus the girls' tournament semifinal, that's 4. But look at they already announced the ticket prices. They already put the tickets on sale. And
which are insanely expensive.
Very expensive. We were talking about like 10,000, 6,000 kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I
150. So they're putting it in the arena setting, and the cheapest tickets are $150.
All the way up and
above the nosebleeds. You're going to be watching it on a screen or watching it on your phone up there.
I mean, I tell you right now on the record, there's so many sponsors of our clients who are interested in buying tickets for that show. They're asking me, like, "Should you can get this show?" Everybody canceled except one. So so they're like, "Well, that's too expensive. I really want to buy a big, nice TV and put it on my living room and watch it." And that was their reaction. So actually, a handful of fans are criticizing RIZIN for selling tickets for that high, but not only that, but selling tickets with only 2 cars announced. And so it's like some fans say, like, this is like announcing a music festival, but doesn't have any number of like names of the band or anything. Instead of having 15 bands listed on a poster, there's only 2. Is they be announced later, but tickets are $10,000. Do you buy it? Kind of stuff.
So I brought this up on the podcast, another podcast, but I want to talk about it with you.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think they're just doing 1 ticket for both events?
That's because, first of all, they need to think about the US audience for pay-per-view. Second, they have to think about the Japanese pay-per-view audience. And when
I mean, not pay-per-view, I meant live.
Live too, but if you separate that, even tickets too, then you would have to sell twice as much, right? So,
true, but
and the first fight's only 5 fights. So how much
Super RIZIN starts at noon, and they expect Mikuru versus Mayweather to start at 3. RIZIN 38 is not scheduled to start till 5.
Right, so it's a long day for audience. A long day.
If you're paying $8,000 to watch Mikuru versus Mayweather, I find it hard to believe that you care about RIZIN 38.
Well, that's the point. That's why they need to create. That's why they need to create a second main event card for the second part of the show. The second part of the show has to be strong enough, because otherwise, maybe after Mayweather and Mikuru, half the fan will leave the arena. That would not be good.
I know that Sakakibara said they're going to do some type of halftime show, but I'm just getting flashbacks of the Olympic skateboarders skateboarding before Tension came out, and me being like, "Oh, this is what they made a big deal about." He drowned on one bar and then left. Right.
I think the big deal for the second part of the show, I can tell you this right now, is not the women's semifinal. It's not that talked about maybe the title fight between Yusaku and Clever. I know that's not going to happen. So it's going to be a Horiguchi fight. It has to be the Horiguchi fight.
No, because
and I can't reveal
names. The whole marketing for it.
Right. We all know he's an opponent actually now. But right now I'm hearing this, that according to RIZIN, he's telling the other side, the opponents of Horiguchi, that Horiguchi is going down to 125. Therefore, he prefer to do a 125 or the catch rate. But Kintaro, I'm sorry, what's his name? Horiguchi is 135, right? I'm sorry. And one, so he's not gonna go down to 125, what I think. But Bellator doesn't have a 125 division, but the potential opponents are thinking that he might have to swallow the catchweight to fight Horiguchi. So this is gonna be interesting,
Well, yeah, because if the last event showed us anything, it's that the women's fights, as much as I love them, aren't enough to keep some fans in the seats. Especially, Mikuru's fan base is so unique that you need someone else who's very popular. And Horiguchi is obviously the guy they're trying to put into that role to keep people in the seats. I would just be worried, though, because, look at the match. A lot of those celebrities came out the fight before Tenshin Takeru, sat down, and then got up and left afterwards.
Exactly.
They weren't there to watch 20 fights. They were there to watch one fight, kind of like a boxing fight from 10 years ago.
The reason why I say that is this. Obviously, Kyohei is there, so he's part of somewhere, right? Either Super RIZIN or the RIZIN 38 part of show. And fighters like Ren Hiramoto, right? Or like a Miura, or a guy like Kintaro, like I mentioned. Those guys have so-called big followers, whatever fan base, right? So those guys would have to be on the second part of the show, I think, some of them. But yet still not strong enough. So I think they would have to rely on Horiguchi.
I think Horiguchi is, because I still remember after that fight how big that line was to see him at the RIZIN store.
Exactly, right. So,
which is why they're gonna have, I think they have their work cut out for them, keeping people at the venue.
Right.
Because
do you think it would be okay to Horiguchi to fight anyone, or they would have to fight him to fight somebody good or somebody at least popular in Japan? Because if he fights nobody, I don't know if that works, right, for a main event.
I think the most important thing for RIZIN is that Horiguchi wins.
Right.
And so they're going to give him a beatable opponent who has a following, because they need people to stay in the seats.
Right.
After Mikuru.
But now I'm hearing that he's thinking about catch weight between 125 and 135. So I think that's going to be a little bit difficult to find the opponent.
That's true. But I'd like to see him go back down in weight, because his recent run in Bellator hasn't been the best.
No. But do you think Bellator will ever do 125? I highly doubt that.
I doubt it, but I think he's realizing that he can't hang with the big boys.
That's too bad.
The bigger boys, but too bad. But I have a question. So they mentioned that RIZIN 38 is essentially going to be like 9 fights, I believe.
Yeah.
And just by doing basic math off of what Sakakibara said, pretty much all of the fights or half of the fights have been announced.
So, because
just without the opponents.
Right.
Pretty much every type of fight has been announced.
Right, Horiguchi against somebody and 2 women fight. That's 3 fights already. So we got 6 fights left.
So we have Kim versus Okikubo. That's the only officially announced fight.
Right, so that's 5 fights left.
First off, my comment on that fight is it's hilarious that they said that Horiguchi is too tough of an opponent for Okikubo. So they're giving him Kim, who's also a very tough fighter. So
is that what they said? Is it too tough an opponent for Horiguchi? Is that what RIZIN said?
They said Okikubo is coming off of an injury, so they didn't want to give him a tough fight right away.
So
they're giving him the former 1 championship champion and Road FC champion. It's lost 1 of his past 20 fights. So nice excuse. But then we have Rena versus Izawa, Hamasaki versus Park. Luis Gustavo versus somebody, Anastasia Svetiska versus somebody, Kota Miura versus somebody, Horiguchi versus somebody, and potentially Hagiwara versus somebody.
Right. I mean, I know who Hagiwara is fighting, and I kind of know who all those people are fighting, but nothing's really officially confirmed. That's really amazing.
I have done some math on the Anastasia Svetiska fight. So Anastasia is an atom weight, and I was looking at it. So here it is. Oshima and Asakura seem very unlikely as opponents. Asakura is coming off that loss, and I think she's not going to come back that quickly. Saori Oshima hasn't been training because her husband was competing in judo.
Right. Yep.
RIZIN's other atomweight, Nisei, they only put her on Okinawa events.
Mm-hmm.
Moedi Suda is fighting like a week before, like 2 weeks before. She's not going to be on it. Hime is also fighting. Edu Takabayashi is also fighting. Emi Fujino is also fighting. Karen is also fighting. All the girls in Shuto are scheduled for September 19th.
Mm-hmm.
So this leaves, essentially, in my mind, only 2 Japanese female fighters, unless they have her fight a foreign fighter.
Who is?
The only possible Japanese options I can think of are Miyu Yamamoto or Miki Matono.
Okay, you can count Miki out.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes,
she's
I had that thought.
MMA to train from next week. So
I had that thought because I was looking at her social media and it didn't look like she was training, but she was noticeably absent from the Jules cards. Okay, so in my mind, that leaves only Miyu Yamamoto as a possible opponent for Anastasia.
Probably,
because every other girl.
I have no idea about that, but I know for the fact that Miki is coming to Vegas next week, so for 1 month. So that's not
that would explain her post about going to America. Okay, so take her out of it. Every other.
Let me add this. I mean, okay, let's talk about. Okay, go ahead. You're trying to predict the opponent, right?
So every other atomweight or possible atomweight that is fought in RIZIN is busy. They're all fighting already in September.
Right, but I'm telling this right now on the record that Mr. Kashiwagi is a great matchmaker. He will find somebody that is suitable for that spot.
No, see, here's my question. The issue comes down to, do they want Anastasia to win? Because, like, do they just want her to come over? Because if they fight Miyu Yamamoto is just going to wrestle her, and she's probably not going to. I mean, she might submit Miyu. There's that a possibility. But there's just not that many atomweights that aren't already fighting in September. So it's kind of like scratching my head trying to think about who it could possibly be.
Right. I mean, Miyu would be the big name. That's probably what RIZIN would want, right? I think that will create something. But is she training now? Or I have no idea.
I mean, that was the thing, too. It looks like she's back in Guam. So I don't think she's training. And so I was really scratching my head because there's a Pancrase show, there's a Shuto show, and there's a Deep Jewel show all in mid-September. So unless they want one of these girls to do an incredibly quick turnaround, which I wouldn't put past them, I just can't think of who is fighting Fatiska.
We'll see. You know?
Bring Jessica Aguilar back. I don't know.
I would love to, and I think they should bring her back maybe New Year's Eve, whatever, as a reserve fight. But other than that, I think they should hire for a U.S. commentary.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's what I'm pushing right now. I'm trying to really push this issue because I think she wanted to be actress to begin with before MMA, and her girlfriend is a famous actress, and she wants to get into that business. So I think it's perfect, right, to do commentary here. Yeah. But anyway, so let's go back to talk about this Miki Motono.
Yeah.
Miki Motono is part of this the MMA fight training in abroad by Abema TV. She's the third set of the fighter coming.
So
she's coming
does that mean she was the only woman that applied for the program?
Exactly, right. Out of like a couple hundreds, whatever application we received, there's only one female applied, which is very disappointing for me. But it was Miki Motono. And not just that she only applied, but she sent the email to the producer, sent the direct message to the producer, asking what's going on. I really want to do this. So she really wanted to do this one. So, she got chosen, and she's coming to Syndicate MMA training for a month. And the great story I want to add is that her friend / fellow fighter, Yoko Higashi, who is like 36 years old, a mother of a child, 8-year-old child. She's actually coming all the way to States to train with her own expenses, meaning she's paying to plane, she renting a car in Los Angeles with 8-year-old, and she's going to drive to Las Vegas.
Wait, are you saying that are you saying if you go to the US, you have to rent a car?
Something like that, yeah.
I didn't know about that. I thought rent a car.
No, you don't have to rent a car, but the point is you have to have a car to get around. So she rented a car, and she's driving with 8-year-old son and driving all the way to Vegas and train. Which is really amazing. It's a polar opposite of what the Asakuras did. They brought a bunch of their friends and translators and their disciples and YouTube staff, and they all went there together for a couple of weeks. But I
was making a reference to Ren Nakai, who showed up there without any means of transportation and didn't realize that she would need to get to places.
Right, and it's just stupid. But the point is, so I think I admire a fighter like Yoko, who
Oh, I do too.
I mean, she's beating Reina. She's a good record, but just can't get a good opponent in Japan because there's not a division there for her, you know?
Well, the division doesn't exist in Japan.
No.
She's pretty much fought every Japanese girl in her division twice.
Right. So
she's had to fight foreign fighters. She was a very high-level judo girl that got injured in college, which forced her to kind of withdraw from the sport. But
right,
she's looked pretty good. Doesn't she? She thinks she trains at Miura. They have a pretty solid team of women over there.
But here's what it is, though. Right now, Mizuki and Kanako is back in Japan for these visa issues, but they all tell me that in terms of female training, it's just not there in Japan. It's just not there. Even the AACC, all these people works during the day, so they come at night and train a couple hours. That's it. None of them are really in this professional training program. So now when we discuss with me and Mizuki and Kanako talk, all right, so why are you guys in Japan for a month? Where are you going to train? You go to ACC, you go to Miui, you go there. The exact word from Kanako was this: "Shoot, it's same everywhere. Not good. So I need to go back and train." So okay, got it. So because of the fact that they have to wait for their fights to be confirmed, I think I'm sending them to Bang Tao, which is a new team in Thailand, and a lot of fighters from the Muay Thai, Tiger Muay Thai left, and girl like Zhang Wei Li and Loma Lukman B, and all these girls are there. So I think it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, very cool. And before we move on, I would say that I've been very high on Miki Matono for a while.
Okay.
I thought that she had the misfortune of fighting like Seika Izawa twice. Now that we know what Seika Izawa is capable of, those losses don't seem so bad. And unlike Saudi Oshima, Miki Matono is actually a strawweight or an atomweight. And she has like the physicality, like she's very strong and she has the build for it. Whereas Saudi Oshima should be a microweight. And so that to me shows that Matono also has international potential because she has such a great judo background. She was described, when I first met her, she was described to me as kind of like a younger version of Ayaka Hamasaki. They're very similar styles. So I'm very excited to see how she does in the US.
Here's what it is. I agree with everything you say. On top of that, many coaches that I talk to, or people in the business, has pointed out a very interesting thing. Out of any Japanese female fighter fighting in Japan, we put Kanako and Mizuki on the side because they're not. Everybody said that Miki is the only one who's improving. And all the other fighters are same. I wouldn't say same, but just improve a little bit. But Miki is vastly improving. You can tell that she's doing something to try to make herself better. So she wants to be You
can tell because if you follow her on social media, she's kind of doing what some of the more established fighters are able to do. So I think she's quite close with Rena and Saudi Oshima because she went to college at Saudi Oshima, but she goes and trains at places outside of AACC.
Right.
So she goes to like specialized gyms to try to get better. And she fought Hime, who beat Oshima. And Miki Matono made Hime not look like a professional fighter. So Miki Matono has gotten a lot better recently.
Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you this right now on the record. And when she comes, of course, I have to talk to her. That it's a mistake for her to do super atom weight just because RIZIN. See, this is the one thing about the Japanese fighters. They have to realize that they all want to fight for RIZIN and become famous. They want to be famous. They fight. Fine. That's fine. But if you're a professional athlete, don't you want to stack up a record and make a living out of a fight purse, right?
Yeah.
In that mentality, she should be doing 115. She should be aiming towards 115 and Invicta, or aiming towards contenders next year, or towards UFC on 115. Forget this 110 super atomweight because it's not going to get her anywhere in the long run.
Well, she's got the muscle mass. I would hate to see her. I would hate to see her lose that muscle mass.
Yes.
To get down to super atomweight. I'd like to see her keep the physicality that she has.
She should be doing 115. And, at this point, if you have a chance to go to 115 UFC or contenders or 110 at RIZIN, which one are you going to choose? Really? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. At her age, too. We're not talking about this 38 years old, 40 years old fighter here. We're talking about the girl who's approaching prime. And I really think she does 115.
my wife likes her,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Motono has a natural charisma to her that she has like a good likability to her.
Mm-hmm.
I think if she went and fought and did well, that she would generate fans without having to fight in RIZIN or something like
Exactly,
that.
that's my point. The bottom line is like, sure, obviously they're already into promoting Izawa, right? Period.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you want to walk into that division when she's not really, comfortable for her at 110?
Yeah.
And if she has a chance to go to UFC or somewhere else, which is obviously bigger than RIZIN, as a life of professional athletes, as a career of professional athletes, which one is the better choice? It's obvious, right?
Well, she was described as little Hamasaki. Just do what Hamasaki did. Go abroad, get a bunch of international success, and if you want to finish your career in Japan, you can come finish your career in Japan.
Exactly, just like a Kuroda did from the Major League Baseball. The last 1 year, he pitched for Hiroshima Carps. It's the same thing. It's just that's what they should be doing.
Yeah.
One thing I really don't understand is this. I think Japanese fighters has to realize this is a professional sport. So let's say you want to be drafted by the Yankees, right? But it doesn't mean your dream comes true. So if you can't get into the Yankees, what do? You go to the Dodgers or you go to whatever the team that give you offer, right? In the major league. But the Japanese MMA fighter doesn't think that way. They think, I'm persistent in the UFC. So forget it. I'm going to fight for Pancras. Or I'm going to fight for LFA. That's like saying no to Mets or no to Dodgers offer and then go to the AAA or AA. It makes no sense to me.
It's so crazy to me because there's so many major promotions now.
Yes.
Make your own path, make your own way.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
And right now, I'll tell you on the record, even though the Japanese fans or the fighter thinks Bellator is definitely number 2, I really don't think so. I mean, look at all these fighters now signing with the PFL. Look at those guys who is on the ranking between 10 to 15 UFC. When they're about to renegotiate their contract, they talk to PFL. And obviously, if they get a better deal, they'll go there. So it's like you can't get to the Yankees, but you can get a better pay at the Dodgers or whatever that is, right? That's what's happening now. But
I mean, it's always
the right fighter doesn't get that at all.
The market's always changing too. I mean,
it is.
There's so many options. You could go to Bellator, you go to PFL. I mean, you don't have to go to the US. Go to KSW or something.
Right.
And if you get big enough, you can eventually get to the UFC if that's your goal. But you could become a dominant champion in a bunch of different promotions out there.
Right. And my point is this. Let's say you're on a full fight contract with anyone. If you have a choice to fight one fight in feeder shows and you don't know when you're ever going to get a fight again and wondering what's going to happen, don't you think that's better to know that you're fighting 3 fights in 1 year so you can make sure you can build your record and make money, right? But Japanese fighter doesn't feel that way. One of the fighters wrote me once this, shoot, I'm only thinking about UFC. It's like a guy who only wears Levi's jeans. I'm only buying Levi's. It's the same mentality. I'm like, come on. Listen.
The most extreme example would be Rin Nakai, who seems to only be interested in fighting for the UFC.
It's a stupidity. She could be fighting. She'd be talking. The PFL is doing flyweight. They'll sign her in a heartbeat, I think. Don't you think so?
I mean, she could be, honestly, outside of Japan, she could probably be in any promotion she wants to be, except for the UFC.
Right. And at 125 women's, she may even have a legit chance to win that $1 million. So she no longer have to ask for rice or gift certificate from her fans.
Yeah.
Right?
But part of me now thinks, though, that she likes asking for that stuff. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think about it.
Why is that? I don't get it.
It's most depressing. It's like, I had to go buy spoiled vegetables in the discount aisle. And I'm like, why are you tweeting about this? This seems incredibly strange.
I think it's that, this is what I got to tell you this. The Japanese mentality is this. Even though you're training, even though you're injured, and obviously you should not be training, they will still pose to make sure I'm trying hard. They'll wait till somebody else around them to tell them, no, you shouldn't do that. You know what I mean?
Well, see, that's dumb.
It's dumb, right? But if you say, okay, I'm going to take it easy and skip practice, and they might think you're lazy, that mentality exists in different sports too. That's what happened with Hideo Nomo. You remember his manager Suzuki in Kintetsu Buffaloes thought that he's namaiki, meaning that he's, talking back to your elderly, so you're going to have to teach him a lesson. So they kept him in the mound and make him pitch almost 200 pitches and stuff like that as a part of a penalty. But back then, they think that's a way to reform your personality.
No, it's dumb. So
that is dumb, right?
Back to the Mickey Matono stuff. One of the good things at AACC is I feel like that Abe doesn't pressure them to do any social media stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to have a realistic expectation of that. And exactly. I think it's much better.
I think it's clear right now that the people who wants to do social media think about the followers and blah, blah, blah. It's bottom line is that these guys just can't win fights or create a very good record. That's why they have to rely on that. But the fighters who's confident with their ability, like Kuramoto or Majima or even Naoki or even Mizuki or even, Motono, I mean, they would be rather want to train and get better than spending time on social media. I think that's a big difference.
So, I guess the big example for me would be Panchan Rina. I don't necessarily think she's a world-class kickboxer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why she has to lean into social media.
Yeah,
to build herself.
It's because of her looks and because of her bikinis and stuff like that. So there's none of the elements involved, right? Not because
I don't think she's a skilled fighter. So I think she has to do that kind of.
Not at all. But here's what it is. So in terms of go back to Rin Nakai, I think by tweeting like, I had a hard time fighting a Connecton Gate, or I have a hard time finding a Japanese grocery stores. I think it's all about PR towards their supporters that I'm trying so hard. Things are so difficult,
I think there's like this whole ecosystem that she lives in where she's like so used to getting these like donations from people.
Exactly. He's got to rely on freebies.
Basically. So like her role is to like portray like the damsel in distress all the time. And it's just weird.
It is weird. That's why for them, making connection is a big deal. Finding a baggage counter is a huge deal. And finding out where to buy a Japanese rice is a huge deal. But I'll tell you this on the record. From the day one on Vegas in Kinoshita, he's been eating Japanese food. No problem. Udon to rice to anything. Zosui to anything,
Would it not be more beneficial for Rinakai just to find like one corporate sponsor that liked her instead of having to beg from a bunch of like fanboys? It just seems weird to me.
I don't know who does the negotiation on that part. I assume that's her coach / husband, but I don't think he would know how to negotiate that kind of deal. Obviously, right?
Yeah,
so
obviously,
it is just
Meanwhile, Kana Asakura, who's using the same management company she's with, is sponsored by Kirin Beer. But okay, they didn't know what they were doing. I'll go back to
that's the management. Isn't that the management they fired?
Yes, right? The management they fired. I'll go back to begging for Don Quixote coupons. But
I don't know why they even announced about firing management. And when you do that, I would never touch that clients. Like, why do you go and do that? Why?
I'd also, this is completely unrelated. You made a comment that I cannot let go. It's been starting around my head. You said Koike and Ishiku isn't happening.
Huh?
Did you say Koike versus Ushiku isn't happening at Rising 38?
Not in September. I don't think so.
Because I know Sakakibara said it. Is this fight cursed? Is it just never going to happen?
I think they have shows in October and November too, and they need that card for those shows. I think that's all there is to it. But I think you'll see that fight happening, but not on September 25.
I was refreshing myself. I was looking at Ushiku's record today, and his last 4 fights are so strange.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 2 split decisions, an incredibly strange fight, and a doctor stoppage in a fight that he was losing.
Right.
He's won 4 fights in a row that.
But here's what it is, though. But like I say on the record, the RIZIN, nothing's totally confirmed, all set in stone till like really last minute. So everything I just say on this podcast might not even happen. Who knows, right? In terms of RIZIN.
This is all just way too reminiscent of the end of Dream to me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember back when Dream was selling tickets to events and there was no fights announced. Tickets go on sale Monday. You better hope that a fighter that you like is on this.
I mean, their mentality was like this. Remember when the Pride did the first show in the U.S., they never really put full cars up to 2 weeks before the show. Their mentality was that the brand Pride itself should sell. So that should be good enough. It was like that in Japan back then in prime time, peak time of Pride, but not like that anymore. Even the UFC has a big brand, but it's still have to announce fights,
Yeah.
No, it's just something just has to change in the Japanese MMA or fight sports in general, which I felt for the last 30 years, but it hasn't been changing. I mean, nobody's really pushing to change anything. So
yeah,
if
I'm
it's
almost at the
not,
point.
then yeah, it's
Do you think that do you think that a promoter needs to come along who just refuses to associate with the Pride era? He's like, I'm going to make something new. I'm not going to try to prop up and associate with this like corpse. Pride's been dead for 20 years.
Well, here's what it is. I think, like, let's say if you go and talk to the potential investors, right, in States, you have to mention, okay, it's going to be like UFC. You have to mention that, right? In Japan, let's go and ask for money from the corporate, investors or hedge fund, whatever that is. They have to mention Pride because that's the only
when you mention Pride
that they can mention to make them understand what could turn out to be. Right?
When you mention Pride, though, doesn't that bring up like a bunch of negative connotations?
Negative is true, right? But there's nothing else. When you say UFC, the Japanese don't get it because they don't know,
Yeah, it's just.
See, this is a very interesting issue. Yesterday, I was eating dinner with Kinoshita and his cornerman. And his cornerman asked me this, oh, I heard Los Angeles Angels in trouble. They might go bankrupt. That's what the owners are selling, right? But like, no. It's the other way around. Owners are selling right now because they can make the biggest profit. So the idea about selling, when you say the team is up for sale, the Japanese immediately think, oh, it's in trouble. Like
interesting.
They just have that mentality, If you're selling, you're in trouble. But really, it's not like that in the business, right? But I think
also sometimes people just sell before they die because the inheritance tax on those things is so huge.
Exactly. But this is a Major League Baseball team. They don't die.
Yeah.
So it's about the fact that when is a good time to sell, right? Obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, were they bringing it up because was that news in Japan because Otani plays for them?
Exactly. I mean, and this is a sad thing. I mean, me here in States, of course, Shohei Otani is one of the biggest story in anywhere, right? He may be the biggest story in all of sports, right? But so sad is this is like Kyohei and Yusaku told me the last time they were here. But that's true. But I think among us, I think in Kura, Sakura is more popular, and they think he's doing much bigger thing than Otani. And I'm like, what?
No.
Like, there's no way. Like, it's just like they shouldn't even belong in the same sentence, period. Right? In terms of professional sports.
I was talking to my wife and other people, and they think Otani might be more popular now
than
Ichiro was at his peak.
Yes, I hope so. I mean, than anybody, right?
Yeah, because I mean, Ichiro was so incredibly popular, but Otani is insanely popular, and he's a pitcher. So pitchers it's like a much more high-profile position anyway.
He's a two-way player. Nobody does. But the problem, I'm just making the point, like, I'm talking only small Japanese MMA community. It's not like they're keen on baseball, but the fact is that they think it's like a same level. It's just, I think their sense is numb in a way as a professional.
They're stuck in an echo chamber of their own. So I'm glad you bring this up because when I was at the last RIZIN show, I couldn't help myself. I noticed these fans that I see at every MMA event. And I just had to talk to them to figure out like what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys are diehard MMA fans, and none of them care about Mikuro Asakura.
See, that's what
so. Like Mikuro Asakura is his own audience. He's young people that watch YouTube.
Audience. Right.
He's young people that watch YouTube. The diehard MMA fans that go to every MMA show in Japan, they don't care about him, which is fine, but it's kind of interesting.
And to be honest, Sakura will kill me if I say this on public, which I will say, but all these die-hard hardcore fans, once you became a RIZIN champion, they would want to see that guy go to UFC.
Yeah, they would. Because when I was at RIZIN, when I was at the weigh-ins for the last RIZIN show, all of these guys are hardcore fans. Like people in the US cannot understand the level of fandom that these Japanese MMA fans have. One of the guys, I see him at every combat sporting event in Tokyo. He lives in Osaka, which means he travels like essentially every weekend to come to Tokyo to watch all these fights. And it's just, he's been doing it for over 15 years. I've seen him at every single event. And they were in the lobby while the weigh-ins were going on. They were watching the UFC. So like if a Japanese fighter went and did very well in the UFC, they would all care about it. Being a very big deal of it.
Bottom line is this: if you're a promoter, of course you have to value Mikuru's followers, Mikuru's fan. Yes. Of course you have to, but you cannot rely on that because he's gonna either retire or leave someday. You still have to run RIZIN afterwards. So those hardcore fans, you can't ignore that because these guys will stay with as a fan forever almost, right? So it's very important to make the hardcore fan bigger, you know? At the same time, reach to the general public too, of course, you know?
Like it's this thing where like it's impossible to convert Mikuru's fans to be MMA fans, like all of them. So what you need to do is you need to take advantage of the opportunity that has, but not rely on it. You need to use that opportunity to build other fans.
Exactly. That's exactly. So they cannot give up the bottom line. Bottom line is the RIZIN is a professional MMA league where fighters who wins will get to the top. It's not the fighters who has the number of big followers who will get a big spot. You know what I mean? That's a different, you know, mentality.
I couldn't help but notice there's a comment that Shu Hirata-san loves to associate many things with baseball.
Ah, that too.
You seem to have quite the baseball knowledge.
No, but not really, because I don't really watch baseball to tell the truth, but I watch show. You know? I actually watch more NBA than MLB, to tell the truth.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And to me, I'm very interested in the negotiation thing. You know, the way I look at NBA players are getting much better deals faster than MLB players.
What do you think of the unrelated one championship? What do you think about the Itsuki situation with her missing weight?
All right, let's talk about that too, because I want to talk about the one in Amazon Prime. Here's what it is.
Because you have, just so people know, I mean, you're helping Abima. You're working with Abima to bring fighters over for the fight.
Exactly. So
the US program.
Just to clarify,
Itsuki was the first fighter that came over.
Exactly. Now here's what it is. Itsuki is not. I'm not managing Itsuki. I'm a consultant for Abema TV, and I'm on their monthly payroll, and I'm doing this show with Abema TV about MMA training abroad. Mm-hmm. First person came as Itsuki and Naoki. So that was part of the TV show. But this time, she really liked the training in New York. So she wanted to come and do the final maybe 5 weeks of training in New York. So Abema asked to help her coordinate and arrange everything else. So I did it I'm the one who arranged and, you know, consulted and everything else. So since we had 5 weeks to go and we were fighting a very tough striker, you know, you really can't rebuild her in 5 weeks. So we pretty much concentrated on her building her mental and physical ability to be able to take a bunch of hits from strikers and being cornered and getting beat up. It still won't give up kind of thing. That's what we really, really concentrated on it. So we did the sparring. When she did the sparring, we called her 4 different girls to come in. So she has to face different fighters every round. And instead of doing only 5 minutes, 3 rounds, we made her do like 7 minutes, like 7 rounds, 8 rounds fight. And just got her used to getting beat up by strikers. You know? Anyway, so you want to talk about the weigh-ins, right? That she missed weight.
I want to talk about the weigh-ins, and I want to talk about post-fight.
Okay. All right. Weigh-ins. I don't know what happened because I'm not a manager, so I don't talk to one about Itsuki. But Itsuki thought there would be only one hydration test during the week. But they went
that's what I figured. What I figured happened, what it looks like happened, and anyone can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, is that she failed the hydration test. So one championship made her drink water until she passed the hydration test, which is why she was like 4 pounds overweight. She
was on weight day before, but she failed the hydration test. The problem about one is this: if you miss weight, the fight still could happen on catch weight. But if you fail hydration test, it doesn't matter if you make weight; the fights will be canceled. So at that point, you have 2 choices. Either miss weight and pass hydration test, or make weight or fail hydration test. So what are you going to do, right? You have to try to make fight happen. So you decide to not make weight and pass hydration test. And the problem about that hydration test is it's really hard to figure it out because it really depends on people. So it's not like something you can do that every day to figure out your trend of your body to make sure you pass that. It's not like that. So it's very tricky.
Well, it's just stupid. I mean, one championship, I can imagine their PR team is exhausted trying to explain their weigh-in procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they would love it if they just adopted normal weigh-in procedures.
Well, I think, the hydration test is good, but that should not be the sole reason. Just should not be the decision-making factors. Let's say if you make weight, if your hydration is a little off, but if you do physical, right, the check by doctor afterwards, let's say we do after the weigh-ins, if the doctor clarified, then that should be fine. Why hydration test such a big deal? It really isn't if it's not that much of a difference. You know what I mean? If she missed the hydration test by far, that's a different issue, right?
So were you able to catch the fight?
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to watch the fight?
Yeah, I did.
Did you see her opponent's Instagram post afterwards?
No. What did she say?
Oh my God. It was like an essay. She talked about how unprofessional, in her opinion, how unprofessional Itsuki's team acted before the fight and her missing weight and all the stuff and how she thought she won the fight. And she just like went off on her. It was like a giant just dump, a heap of her talking shit.
What do they do at the weigh-ins? I mean,
so she said that they were like filming her.
Yeah, I mean, the TV crew, right?
No, not Itsuki. That they were filming her.
Lynn, okay.
Yeah, that they were filming Lynn. Like people were following her around, filming her.
Oh, in the
she was like, "What? Like, what the hell are you guys doing?" She was like, "I don't know who you are. Like, why are you guys following me around, filming me?" And then,
well, that's something one should have experienced playing, right? I mean, there's a TV crew from Japan that he's going to follow you.
I don't know if it was the BMA crew, to be clear, she didn't say. And then she was upset because Lynn also missed weight initially. And then she said she hit the gym. She failed her hydration test, I believe, as well, or something. But then she tested again and passed.
She hit the gym and sweated up and got on the scale, passed the weight, and made a weight and passed the hydration test too?
Yes.
So that tells the hydration is not really reliable.
So, but she was upset in her post because Itsuki, to her, didn't seem to care that she missed weight. And she's like, "Well, I was in the gym working out. Itsuki was just like out in the hallway chatting with people and stuff." And so, yeah. So it led to that giant post, I believe, also led to a ton of negative comments from Japanese people also not liking Itsuki's attitude.
Really?
And saying that she's too, because there's one thing the Japanese people hate. It's when you miss weight.
Oh, yeah.
They absolutely hate it.
It's like a heavy crime, right?
Yeah, I'm like, and it's poor Itsuki already has like the 20-minute YouTube video of Aoki just ripping into her and calling her not a professional. And then you add this onto it where she misses weight and people are just piling on her. But I don't think it'll bother her. I don't think she cares. But it's just, she seems very polarizing. A nice way to put it, I guess.
Well, I mean, I'm not her manager. I wasn't there, but I'm the one who assigned to her striking coach, and I was in communication with her striking coach throughout the week. But she didn't even know what was going on because she was not allowed to go to the weigh-ins, and they were taking her brother instead, and the TV crew and everything else. So I don't know the rules, but I don't know why she had to drink 4 pounds worth of water to pass. And I'll tell you this: is this announced how many percent of the purse she gave up?
50%.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah,
that's
half
a lot. Because think about it. Usually it's about 20 or 25. I had to negotiate to get the 30 when Naoki's opponent missed the weight by 6 pounds. So you're talking about that's way more than 4. So I don't know why it was 50% that she had to give up.
Means at that point, if I was her, I just wouldn't have taken the fight. I mean, I know it's crazy, but I think one championship needs Itsuki Hirata more than Itsuki needs one championship. And it's because she is the Rabima ratings. If she's not on a one championship show, the ratings are awful on Abima.
If one is still valuing a Japanese market, because they're on Amazon Prime now, so they might be looking into North America a little bit more.
Aren't they supposedly coming to Japan in November?
Yeah, November, 2-day show is on here. The bout agreement's being issued, so I think it's going to happen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, 2-day show. But I don't know the cause. I think it's already announced that Yushin is fighting Ong, right?
I think Ong announced that. Yeah, Ong
yeah.
announced that himself.
He signed the bout agreement, so that's Ong.
I mean, if it's a Japan show, you got to think he's got to be on it. They'll probably slap like VVMA or the other Japanese fighters on it.
Right, they would have to, right? But Wakamatsu is fighting a month before that, so he's not. That's not going to happen, right? So,
yeah.
I wonder what's going to be. But again, back to Itsuki Hirata. I mean, you miss weight, no excuse. Sure.
Yeah.
You have to get criticized. You have to take this shit. Can't help.
I'm actually going to say that in this situation, she does have an excuse because she didn't really miss weight. She failed some arbitrary hydration test. Yeah, and then they made her miss weight to pass the hydration.
Yeah, exactly. But that's still, this is not her first fight in one. She knew exactly what's happening. So I actually told her to bring that indicator that measures the hydration test. So you do that every day in New York just to figure out your body trend and stuff like that. But they never did that,
I will say, if people are curious about this, Ham Sohee's coach, who is married to her sister, who runs Team Mad, has an incredibly popular YouTube channel in Korea. Like, it's blew my mind how popular it is. And he does like a bunch of behind the scenes footage when she fights for one championship. So you can actually see all the weird testing they do. And she actually got hospitalized in her last fight before the weigh-in. It was very strange. Really? Then there's this weird thing where like Ham Sohee failed the hydration test. So and it was like her and John Wayne Parr had to like come back and do it again. It all seems very weird. I don't like it.
I don't like it when they cut weight too much and do too much water cut, and because the fighter looks very unhealthy on scale sometimes. So there are something to be looked at in terms of one championship weight system. If there's something positive about it, that's something I think we should take a look at. But this hydration test is very tricky. So if this happened, it's already been happening too many times. So they should make some kind of rules about that to let doctor clarify, even though you failed hydration test by a little bit. I don't know how much is a little bit that we're talking about here, but
That's always been the criticism with them, though, just the complete lack of transparency with what's going on. But
exactly too, right?
I guess before we sign off, we should announce that before this, this September 11th, we have essentially every Japanese promotion putting on a show in the Tokyo area. So
yeah, that's right.
It's a very busy week. It's going to be a very busy month in September.
Right. Deep, Shuto, everything, right?
Yeah, we got Deep. Shuto's a week later, but we got Deep, Pancrase, K1. I think Deep's actually doing 2 events. So if you are a Japanese MMA fan, September 11th is the day for you.
Well, that's right. And September 11th is the day for the anniversary for September 11th. Right, so
very different for you in New York, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And how was like one championship in Japan? Was it shown on Abema only, not on Amazon Prime? Right? Was it on Amazon Prime too? Or
trying to remember.
Yeah, because I wonder about that because Amazon usually they geo-block. Like for Murata's boxing fight, I had to get a VPN to watch that.
I think it was on Abema.
So nothing only the Prime outside Japan then.
I think so, yeah. Okay. Could be wrong, though. I'll have to have a look into that again, but yeah.
Here's what it is. One thing, it's positive for one championship, not because they're on Prime, maybe they're because on Prime, but I've started seeing some of the footage on ESPN Sports News.
Well, they're doing something. Right. They're paying people because there's MMA pundits now that are covering one championship who would never have covered one championship in the past.
Right, exactly, right.
So they're making some concentrated marketing attempt to get more exposure in the U.S. market.
Because I saw them on like ESPN's top 10, some interesting thing about in sports, and there's one was something that happened in one championship, but there was Amazon Prime on the top right corner of the screen.
Yeah, nice.
So I think be on Amazon Prime will make one go into maybe ESPN, a few other sports shows. So that's something positive for one, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, One Championship, I love the Amazon Prime stuff. One Championship has their problems. They also try out new stuff, so it's kind of fun to watch.
Right.
See what they're
And
up to.
actually, I was pretty interested to see that at the PFL, you know, because of, you know, the person who used to work PR for One is now working for PFL. And
yeah,
not only that, I saw like 3 or 4 staff that used to work for One is no longer working for One. And it was there in London covering the show. I think a couple guys are running some Asia MMA website, whatever that is. So I think some of the ex-employee of One is getting involved with PFL. It seems like.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Should I expect some pretty interesting? PFL has 5 billion viewers. PFL gets more views than the Soccer World Cup kind of.
Yeah, but here's the bottom line: the PFL does pay well, and they do create millionaires every year.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you don't really see that on MMA, right? So
when there's a reason Kayla Harrison's over there, she's not going to leave. Exactly. She's never going to leave. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if it's a big money fight against Cyborg or whoever, right? So.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you right now, I think I'm telling this to everybody that, I mean, if you can't get to the UFC, take a look at the PFL. Or even though you think you could get to UFC, you should be looking at the PFL because you'll be making more money there, maybe, right? Yeah. I mean, as a professional athlete, if you can't get in, like I said, if you can't get into LA Lakers or Celtics, you go somewhere else, right? Still.
Or just, I mean, if you go and if you find success there, you can enter the UFC like at a higher tier. I mean, PFL was World Series of Fighting, and World Series of Fighting had Justin Gaethje, who essentially came directly into the UFC as a superstar because of that.
Exactly. So that's my point. Like even Ben Askren and Demetrius Johnson deals too, because that could happen if you're a big name, right? In a bigger platform. So that's exactly my point. You know. Well, anyway, so I think we talked enough for today.
Yeah.
And
great catching up.
Yeah, I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, look forward to Kinoshita's fight today. I hope he does well.
Oh yeah, I hope so. I hope he wins this. I'm just knocking on wood. Let's hope. You know?
Yeah, let's hope.
All right, so I'll see you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, let's do it.
All right, and thank you for listening to everyone, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Sure.
All right, bye-bye.